Netflix is changing the film industry for good. Let's say the year is
1981.
The ticket you bought for the E.T. movie is about $2.76. You go to concessions and buy a popcorn and a soda for about $1.75. You then go to the theater and you watch E.T. for like 2 hours or whatever, and then you go home. In total, you spend about $4.53. In today's current money, that's about $16.24, using September 2025 numbers, whatever. But let's do the same scenario, but current year. The ticket you bought is $9.50. And then you go to concessions and you buy a popcorn and a soda, rounding about for an estimated $20. And keep in mind, I'm using like actual real numbers that I kind of got at Alamo Drafthouse. So then you can go ahead and watch like whatever movie you want and then you leave. But no matter what, in total, for the ticket, for the popcorn, for the soda, you spent about $30 for that one trip. And it's just you, the one person. But hold on, let's adjust the entire first scenario for inflation just to see, what the numbers compare to. The ticket price adjusted for inflation is about $9.97. That's a good thing. That means that over time, the price of a ticket has relatively stayed consistent, which is actually kind of surprising, to be honest. It at least gives the impression that studios and distributors want you to see their movie, so the price of the ticket has stayed relatively consistent throughout the years. Whether it's actually affordable, but at least it stayed consistent for the past 40 years or so. Gotta do whatever it's due. Let's go ahead and flip it around and let's check the concession side of it and see how that is. So the popcorn and soda combo that you bought in 1981, that's only going to be about $1.75. So if you use that number and you apply a modern inflation to that number, the popcorn and soda bundle today would actually cost you $6.27.
What the heck?
Once again, that's compared to the price of modern day, of where I even estimated downwards without tax, where the modern day was $20. But then the inflation numbers for 1981, it was only $6.27. That's literally a difference of $13.73. And once again, this is all considering it's just one person. You're just one person. And keep in mind that this is not an isolated incident. All over the US economy, people are doing worse off than they were, 20, 30, 40 years ago. Not to retread ground and whatnot, but CEOs today are making 261 times more than their worker. Whereas in 1961, that number was only 21 times. And look at housing, for example. In Q2 of 2025, the median house sold price is 514.97% more than the price of houses sold in 1961. And then just one more statistic just to top it all off, just cuz. But the median wage earned by salary and hourly workers in 1981 was $5.15. In 2023, it was $19.14. And then if you take both numbers and adjust them for 2025 inflation, you're basically looking at $19.23 versus $20.89. The theme that I'm trying to show here is kind of a corroboration with facts about what we all feel and about what we all know, and is that we're all low-key kind of broke. Yes, and that includes you. That includes you. You're broke as shit. But in total, the average person is simply not earning more money. And the money that is being generated and the money that is being earned is being concentrated towards the tippity top. And every single year is getting worse and worse and worse. And so it makes you wonder if the average American can't afford rent, if the average American can't afford food, if they can't afford healthcare, if they can't afford childcare, then how do they spend money on luxuries? And even though, once again, somebody like me really enjoys it, going to a theater and going to the cinema, that's a luxury expense. I'm pretty sure most people would rather put food on the table and not go to bed hungry than see a movie that just came out. I don't know, just kind of tough call there. And so it tends to make a lot more sense when you look at a graph of, like, for example, the tickets sold per
year.
In
2002,
it peaked, and ever since then, it's been decreasing and decreasing a little bit more and more and more. You know, and obviously 2020 has a major dip. We all know what happened, so no need to explain that one. But then it makes you wonder of why it's declining so much. Is it just simply because of the economy? Because if so, I mean, you know, you still have like 20 years between 2000 and 1981 where things are getting worse. But still, once again, it peaks at 2002. And once again, my first thought was it was just purely economically. Like me personally, I'm an avid moviegoer, but I can totally see why other people don't do it. Because especially if you break down the numbers, it's low-key kind of a money drain. So like, for example, I go to Alamo Drafthouse. So I actually do pay for a monthly pass. It's $21 per month. So I pay $21, and then for every ticket I buy, I have a $2 convenience fee added to that ticket. And every single movie, I'm not really a big soda drinker, so I get water, but I will usually almost always get popcorn. And the popcorn is $10 plus the gratuity, plus whatever tax they put on top of that. And so I'm paying for $21 plus a $2 convenience fee plus a $10 popcorn. And if I'm going to see a movie like at least more than once per month, yo, this money kind of adds up. I'm not gonna lie. If I went and I saw a movie every single week, my estimated monthly expenses for just going to the theater is $77. Once again, if it's just like a hobby and you have the extra kind of money laying around, $77 might not be that bad. But once again, if someone is struggling, and once again, I don't know if you looked at the economy, man, but I mean, it's like whatever. If you are struggling to either pay rent, pay medicine, pay whatever it is, you see this $77 expense coming out of your pocket, and yeah, of course, this is what you're gonna cut. But once again, you look at the graph, and it does peak at 2002. The economy, once again, has kind of been getting worse since about the 80s, since Mr. Reagan. So it does make you think, is affordability the main reason, or... Now, it's difficult to find good research on this because 2020 had such an impact on literally everything. I still can find like a statistic here or two. For example, in November 2018, 28% of respondents to a poll done by Statista strongly preferred watching a movie in the theater as a first-time watch, whereas 15% strongly preferred watching streaming as their preferred method as a first-time watch of a movie. Just 2 years later, only 14% of people strongly preferred watching it in the theater first, as opposed to 36% on streaming. Now, refer back to the graph about the ticket sales. So an additional reason that I found for the decline could be because of the rise of DVD, because it was a lot easier to get access to a movie after a movie was out of theaters. So it was essentially like, oh, if you don't really see a movie or whatever it may be, you can wait 6 months and you can just have it on DVD and you can just watch it that way. You know, it was an easier form of access to a movie. And so you take that and you actually compare it to the
mid to late 2000s.
And so you take that and you can come to the conclusion that accessibility to a movie can negatively affect the sale of tickets sold in theaters. And so you couple that with the fact that after the DVD in the early 2010s, late 2000s, there was an easier and even easier form of accessing a movie after it was out of theaters. And that was streaming. However, it's not just black and white, and it's not just accessibility. There's still a lot more that goes into the idea and the practicality of streaming that you can see might affect the way theaters perform. Number one, price. This one makes literally the most sense. Once again, I'm paying like $77 per month just to see 4 movies, in a theater. And so if price is a factor for you, of course it just makes more sense to go to streaming. If you can pay for $10 or even, I guess now without ads, $18, and you can pay that amount and you can get access to not only 4 movies, but maybe even 5, maybe even 6. You get access to literally an entire library of just a ton of movies, of endless content that you're generally never gonna run out of. And so while I do consider myself a semi-avid movie watcher, comparatively speaking, I can't compete with somebody who just, does a lot of streaming, and someone who just likes to watch movie after movie after movie that just happens to be on the streaming platform that they happen to have. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with it, but it just makes sense why. Why do you want to spend $77 going to movies when you can spend $20 and I can see just as many, if not more movies than you? And number 2, as a second reason that someone might prefer streaming over going to theater, is they may actually prefer the home experience a bit more, and it makes sense because every single time you go outside, you're taking a risk. You're taking a risk on so many things and so many factors that you literally cannot compute how worse your day can get just based on some random RNG of something happening outside. Who knows? I see this a lot of anecdotally online, but what if somebody's talking during your movie? Or what if the food was bad? Or what if you sat next to somebody who smelled funny? And all of these things can just ruin your experience of a movie. Whereas if you saw it at home in your own comfort, you literally don't even have to change. You literally can just slap it on and you can literally throw a popcorn in the microwave for 3 minutes and you have popcorn and you have semi-okay food, I guess, whatever. And you're just watching it like that. Like, it just makes sense to why someone might prefer just being at home, because once again, it's comfortable and you don't have to take the risk of somebody else ruining your movie experience. And so for a third reason, and this one is a bit more complex, but it's essentially the window a movie will be playing in theaters. How many times have you been scrolling on Reddit? Because who does that? But how many times do you see somebody just kind of mention, oh, this movie, I don't know, it just kind of seems a bit off. I'll just wait for it to come to streaming. And why does that happen? Because movies are actually staying in theaters less. Nearly a decade ago in 2017, it was really standard for a movie to have a 90-day exclusive window in the theater. So for 90 days from the time the movie released, the theater had exclusive access to play this movie, and it wasn't going to go to streaming, and it wasn't going to go to whatever else it may be, DVD and whatnot. And since it was a contractual obligation that the studios and the theater made together, it was mandatory. The movie had to be there. But now theaters are actually fighting for a 45-day release window. Yes, they're actually fighting for a 45-day. So what happened during 2020 was essentially that a lot of studios got negotiating power to essentially break these 90-day mandatory clauses and were able to put their movies on whatever respective streaming platform pretty fast, comparatively speaking, And so studios actually want the ability to put movies on their streaming platform pretty much whenever they want. And that's bad for movie theaters, because if a theater can't get your movie guaranteed to be played, for 2-3 weeks, I mean, what are they gonna show? Because they're a movie theater. But it's still kind of complex about how the breakdown of things work. So let me try to offer a breakdown in the best way possible. So here's what happened when a brand new movie hits the market. So in the opening weeks of a brand new film, the ticket price will be divided between the studios and the theater. Let's just say it's a blockbuster, so you can safely I don't know for sure. I've seen some weird numbers, but let's just say it's a 60-40 split. So studios and distributors, they'll be the ones taking the 60% and theaters will simply be taking the 40%. Now with time, this actually kind of flips. Now obviously the one downside is movies
can be
very front loaded, and so their first and second week will have a lot more people watch it than say their 8th week. It only makes sense, especially for the people that do want to see it. They'll probably see it as soon as it comes out, and the people that don't want to see it probably just won't. So it only makes sense that ticket wise, studios and distributors will be the ones making the most amount of money in this aspect. But on the other side, for concessions,
that's
all the theater. And so for example, a bucket of popcorn might cost a theater about 90 cents to produce, so about $1. And so if they sell it for a price of $10, that is a $9 gross on that per order of popcorn sold. So that is literally an insane profit margin, especially considering popcorn is probably their most popular option that they can offer, even including a soda, which once again, it's a soda. You put the cup under the fountain, or maybe they just bring you a cup and it's a predetermined amount. This is not, you're telling me this soda that's in a 32-ounce bottle, this is $10. This is probably 50 cents nonetheless. So in an ideal world, the studios and distributors, they will be the ones making the gross amount of the tickets, and concessions, since that is all the theater for them to make and sell, they will be the ones taking all the money from that. And so theoretically, you're supposed to have like sort of a healthy relationship of studios and movies bring people to theaters, and theaters, by just having people there watch a movie, they will most likely buy concessions, and so both sides are happy. But unfortunately, the world is not quite ideal. So for example, what happens when a movie flops? The studios actually want to pull the movie out of theater as soon as possible so they can make money by putting it on a streaming platform and do what they want with it as fast as possible to recover as much money as they can. And obviously for theaters, if studios can just pull movies out whenever they wanted to, they're kind of in trouble. And so therein lies the push and pull of a theater versus a studio. It's simply theaters want people to be in their theater, and an easy way to do that is with mandatory exclusive windows where if you want to see this movie, you have to come to the theater. And studios, they just want money. I mean, the theaters want money too, but it's like, whatever. And so they just want to regain as much money as they possibly can from it, especially if a movie is failing. But to tie all this back together, all of these are reasons why people might prefer streaming to actually going to a theater. And so the reason I bring it up is because the dynamic does change if, for example, the studio and distributor just so happen to own their own streaming service. And so we're here. At this point, I don't really have like much facts and analytical standpoints to like provide or whatnot. It's pretty much just gonna be like anecdotal and opinion based. But yeah, Netflix intends to buy Warner Brothers. At least when it comes to Disney has a pretty proven track record to release movies into theaters. But Netflix, on the other hand, Netflix doesn't have that same track record. And Netflix having its own streaming platform, it has so much more negotiating power against a lot of theaters and cinemas. Like completely ignoring the fact that, ignoring kind of the whole monopolization of Netflix acquiring Warner Brothers. I mean, they'll have a lot of, once again, negotiating power against theaters, and theaters are already not doing good as is, so a little extra push into the right direction. And yeah, a lot of theaters might low-key be suffering. And it's just a sad thing to see. Like, once again, I understand movies are expensive. I've been using a lot of numbers from the perspective of it just being one person, you know, probably like me or something. But if it was a family and you had 4 people to feed, or even 5, you know, the expense of just a single movie goes up higher and higher and higher. It's just not feasible anymore. But that's why it makes me so sad and upset. Simply because, you know, theaters have been such an integral portion of my life. Because it's one thing to watch movies at home, but being able to go out and experience something with, you know, your family or with, you know, whoever it may be, it's fond memories. You know, like one of my more fond memories of my dad is when he took us to see like the first Transformers, or my mom, one of the few movies she saw with us was like Big Mama 3 and San Andreas. Especially considering how there's such a finite amount of sociable things to do in a world that's increasingly unsociable. You know, you can look at the downfall of malls, you can look at the downfall of a lot of public spaces, but a lot of things to do with your friends and whatnot, or whatever it may be, it just doesn't exist anymore. You know, it's just one of those things that you as a teenager, a kid, an adult, you can just kind of grow up with, and it will always be a part of your life. And of course, once again, it's not like these things can never happen at home, but being able to immerse yourself and fully enjoy a movie how it's intended to be watched, I mean, it just feels different. You know, there's always like Christopher Nolan in the background talking about how you should always see his movies, and probably every movie in a theater, because a theater just has a more immersive experience. Once again, this is like the 100th mention of the economy being bad, but how many people at home tend to have like a 1,000-inch screen TV with like speakers that go all around you? You know, it's just not the same a lot of the times. But you know, with that being said, that's sort of my main thing. You know, it's just sad to see us lose something, and sad to see possibly theaters wither away even more and more and more. Going back to, you know, the idea of a studio wants to make money, obviously. And so a safe bet to them is gonna be a blockbuster, for example. So when it comes to mid-level and even low-budget films, those will never be put in theaters. Why would Netflix risk losing a bunch of money on this low-budget film when they could just put it on their streaming platform? And I don't know how their analytics work, but they possibly will not take a loss at all if they did something like that. But there was still a director and there were still actors who took part in that. And like, granted, maybe they would be fine with it just being on a streaming platform. Maybe they don't actually care about whether you are able to immerse yourself at home or in a theater, but still it helps things become an event. You know, just recently there's Shelby Oaks by Chris Stuckman. If it wasn't put in a theater and it was just, you know, went straight to streaming, would it still have been put on like my radar, for example? Would I still have made an effort to watch it? Probably not. You know, part of the reason why something like that might be so special, you know, not everybody can just put a movie in a theater. There's only such a limited amount of slots for something like that to happen. So to get a movie put in a theater, it's kind of special. It kind of makes it feel different. And so once again, Chris Stuckman, who was just a YouTuber for the longest amount of time, he managed to do something that's special. I want to see what he produced. I want to take part in this event of his first feature film. I don't think it would have had the same effect on me. I don't know about other people, but if it actually just did go straight to streaming, I don't think I would have cared at all. And you can kind of extend this logic to other movies, particularly a lot of larger ones. Once again, for example, Infinity War and Endgame. You know, those were major events that everybody was able to take part of. And it can create hype in the feeling of, oh, I'm gonna see it this week. Have you saw the movie yet? Well, you really should go out and see it. Oh, well, I haven't seen it yet. If, you know, you wanna come with me? You know, there's all these different things that help make a movie foster kind of a community. And once again, it makes it feel special. If Infinity War and Endgame immediately went to Disney Plus, would it still have done pretty good? Yeah. Would it still be as iconic that we know of? Once again, and that's literally a payoff for the biggest IP of the entire decade of 2010. But obviously, not everybody will share that same opinion. For example, the co-CEO of Netflix. Ted thinks Barbie and Oppenheimer would have been just as big if it was on Netflix. That's like totally ignoring the part about like how the dichotomy of, oh, you have fun, poppy, girlish movie over here, and you have dark, brooding, serious biopic over here. Oh, which movie shall we choose? And it turns out a lot of people just did both. Like, that's part of the reason why that's part of the reason why both of them were so successful. It's because a lot of people, you know, even my friends, one of the things we talked about was, oh, do we want to see them back to back? No, we did different days, but still, that's something, you know. It was a thing of, oh, going back to back of whichever movie you chose first. And even if you didn't see it in the same day or whatnot, you still went from the dichotomy of fun poppy movie versus dark serious movie. It's not, I feel like that wasn't too hard to understand. But still, overall, Netflix is going to go through a lot of legal battles and trouble to acquire Warner Brothers. Do I personally have hope that something will happen and Netflix will not be able to acquire Warner Brothers? Something tells me no, but I don't know. It's just kind of a feeling. I will say though, rest assured, Variety reports Netflix says Warner Brothers movies will remain in theaters, but windows will evolve to be much more consumer friendly. I don't know what that might mean, but Netflix CEO says movie theaters are dead. What is the consumer trying to tell you? Once again, I wouldn't personally think they're dead, at least not yet, but we're in a period of transition. Folks grew up thinking, I want to make movies on a gigantic screen and have strangers watch them and to have them play in the theater for 2 months and people cry in sold out shows. It's an outdated concept. That's comforting, I guess.